In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a stray mother dog, exhausted, ribs protruding, and eyes filled with despair, led her tiny puppies into a stranger's backyard. Why would a wild mother risk bringing her vulnerable young so close to humans? And how would the startled homeowner react to these unexpected visitors? What followed was a touching story of survival, trust, and the fight for a second chance. Kyle was used to seeing the occasional stray dog wander around the cul-de-sac near his suburban home. His property was tucked away in a peaceful neighborhood, surrounded by a tall wooden fence for privacy. It was the last place he expected a visitor, especially not a family of dogs. But one morning, as he sipped his coffee in the kitchen, something caught his eye. A slight movement near the backyard shed. Stepping closer, he saw her, a skeletal, ragged-looking dog, half hidden under the eaves, panting heavily. Kyle stopped in his tracks. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she wasn't aggressive. Then, from behind her, 3 trembling puppies shuffled forward, peering cautiously into the yard. They were thin, their fur patchy and unkempt, their wide eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and fear. Kyle had never seen these dogs before. Why had they chosen his yard? For a moment, he hesitated. Should he approach slowly? Call animal control? Then, he took another look at the mother's protruding ribs and the unsteady way her puppies moved. His heart pounded. They were starving. Had they become so desperate that they had no choice but to seek help from a human? Kyle carefully opened the back door and spoke in a soothing voice, calling to the puppies. The mother tensed. She looked ready for rejection or even hostility. Her body trembled, but instead of running, she simply turned away as if too exhausted to fight anymore. And then, something incredible happened. Kyle stepped outside, carrying a small bowl of water and some dog food. He crouched low, keeping his voice gentle as he inched forward. The mother hesitated, her nose twitching as she caught the scent of food. The puppies huddled close to her legs, sniffing the air. Fear and hunger clashed in their tiny bodies. Would they accept his help? Or would they run? Kyle slowly extended his hand and motioned for them to come closer. It was a delicate dance, one wrong move, and they could flee. But hunger won. The mother, drawn by the scent of food and Kyle's calm demeanor, took a shaky step forward. And then another. She was still trembling, but she was moving toward him. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. Kyle watched from a few feet away as the starving mother and her 3 puppies cautiously inched toward the food he had placed on the ground. The puppies clung to their mother, shaking from both cold and fear. They couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Their fur was scruffy, their bodies fragile. Every hesitant step forward seemed torn between their deep-rooted fear of humans and their sheer desperation for food. Their mother's ribcage was painfully visible. Kyle could tell. They had been struggling to survive for a long time. Encouraged by his calm posture and soft voice, the mother dog stretched her nose toward the bowl of water. At first, she simply sniffed. Then, tentatively, she took a small sip. The thirst took over, and soon, she was drinking more eagerly. Her puppies followed, gathering beside her to lap up the water. Kyle's chest tightened as he watched them. They were so fragile, yet so determined. Slowly, he reached for a container from the fridge, pulling out some shredded chicken. He carefully placed the food on a shallow dish and set it down in front of them. A moment of tension filled the air. Would the mother trust him enough to let her puppies eat? Her wary eyes flicked back and forth between Kyle and the food. Then, perhaps as a sign of reassurance, she let out a short bark. And nudged her puppies forward. Hesitant at first, they sniffed the chicken. Then devoured it. They bumped into each other in their eagerness, gulping down the scraps like they hadn't eaten in days. Even as they ate, their mother never let her guard down. Her eyes never left Kyle. But the absolute terror in them had lessened. She no longer saw him as an immediate threat. Kyle remained perfectly still, afraid any sudden movement might send them scattering. "I want to tell you that you're safe here," he thought. After a few minutes, he carefully backed away, giving them space to eat in peace. From behind the glass patio door, he watched them. His heart aching. And his mind racing with questions. Where had they come from? And how had this mother dog wandered so far, growing thinner with each step, in search of help? This was more than just a stray dog wandering into a backyard. It was an act of trust. A desperate mother, at her breaking point, had chosen to take a risk. And now, Kyle had a choice to make. Would he simply feed them and move on? Or was this the start of something much bigger? It was clear now. For the first time in what was likely a long, desperate journey, the stray mother dog felt safe. Or maybe it had been pure luck. Either way, Kyle's backyard had become her refuge. The next morning, a few neighbors spotted the small dog family in Kyle's yard, and soon, word spread. Some were concerned. Others advised him to call animal control immediately. His next-door neighbor, Mr. Sanders, leaned over the fence and warned, "Strays, even puppies, can be unpredictable. If you're not careful, you might get bitten." But Kyle couldn't connect that fearful image to the trembling, starving mother and her fragile pups. He knew that if he called the authorities, they might separate the family. Or worse, see them as a burden. Instead, he called a local rescue group. Because these dogs didn't need punishment. They needed help. Winter, a volunteer from the rescue organization, listened carefully to Kyle's story. "They're clearly malnourished," she said. "And if the puppies are that young, probably just 4 or 5 weeks old, they'll need extra care. Do you think I can get close to the mother?" Kyle asked. "She's not aggressive, but she's wary. I've already fed them twice. The puppies eat eagerly, and the mother, well, she lets me as long as I move slowly." Winter suggested a gentle approach before attempting to capture them for medical care. "Keep providing food and water. Create a safe space in your yard where she feels protected. That way, when we do take them in, it'll be less traumatic." Kyle agreed. Forcing the mother into a crate or rushing the process felt wrong. So, that night, he got to work. He searched his garage for anything that could serve as a temporary shelter. An old wooden crate. A waterproof tarp. Soft towels. Carefully, he placed them in the quietest corner of his backyard, under the small overhang near the shed. Somewhere the mother dog might feel safe. Somewhere she could rest. When he placed another bowl of food nearby, something changed. This time, the mother and her puppies approached faster. The eldest puppy sniffed the bedding cautiously. Then crawled inside, curled up, and let out a small sigh. One by one, the others followed, huddling together in a warm, safe pile. For the first time since arriving, they weren't shivering in the cold. Kyle smiled to himself. At least tonight, they'd sleep in comfort. The fragile bond between Kyle and the stray family grew stronger each day. Each morning, he refilled their water and provided food, a mix of leftovers and simple kibble he had bought at the store. The puppies grew bolder, wagging their tiny tails as they greeted him. They tugged at his shoelaces. Nipped playfully at his fingers. The mother still watched him carefully, but something was different. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer on edge. She was beginning to trust him. Yet, there were still limits. If Kyle moved too quickly, she would flinch. If he reached out too soon, her ears would flatten, and she would take a cautious step back. She had survived on the streets. It made sense that she was still hesitant. What had she been through? What had these dogs endured before finding his backyard? Kyle didn't push. He let them set the pace. And slowly, they let him in. As the puppies got stronger, they also became more energetic. They wrestled. explored, and tried to squeeze through gaps in the fence. Kyle worried about how to keep them safe. What if they wandered off? What if something scared the mother? His neighbor's warning haunted him. If she gets startled by a passing cat or a curious kid, what will she do? And then there was the cost. The rescue group had promised some financial assistance for vet care. But resources were stretched thin. Kyle knew these dogs would need vaccinations, deworming, and medical exams. He couldn't do it alone. And just when things seemed to be going smoothly, a new problem arose. One afternoon, as Kyle set down their food, something caught his eye. The mother dog was limping. He stepped closer, concerned. Her back leg. There was a wound. Not fresh, but open. Possibly from exhaustion, or maybe from a fight with another stray. His stomach tightened. If the wound got infected, it could threaten her ability to care for her puppies. And without her, they wouldn't survive. Kyle crouched slowly, speaking in a soft voice, hoping she would let him inspect it. But as soon as his fingers brushed her fur, she flinched violently and let out a low, warning growl. She was scared. Not of pain, but of being hurt again. Kyle took a deep breath. This was no longer just about feeding a stray family. This was responsibility. The puppies didn't just need food. They needed protection. And if their mother was too weak to care for them, they would need him. Kyle grabbed his phone and sent an urgent message to Winter. We have a problem. The mother is injured. I need help as soon as possible. That evening, he sat near the kennel, absent-mindedly stroking one of the puppies as it nuzzled against his hand. The mother dog lay nearby, her breathing shallow, her eyes flicking between Kyle and her puppies. For the first time, she looked tired. Defeated. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was relying on him. Hang in there, Kyle thought. We're going to fix this. We're going to keep your family safe. But even as he made that promise, a sinking feeling told him this was far from over. Kyle had been content just feeding the stray dog family, giving them a safe place to rest. But the mother's injury changed everything. Time was no longer on their side. She needed medical care. Now. The next morning, Winter arrived with a warm but cautious smile. She respected the mother dog's space, moving slowly as she stepped into the backyard. The puppies, wagging their tiny tails, ran toward her without hesitation. But their mother. She remained stiff, wary, her body tense with distrust. Poor thing, Winter murmured when she spotted the wound. She needs a vet. At the very least, she needs someone to examine it properly. Kyle nodded. She's limping worse than yesterday. I tried to clean it, but she wouldn't let me touch her. From inside the makeshift kennel, the mother dog watched them, ears pinned back, her eyes filled with pain and suspicion. Winter knelt down and spoke softly. We can try to get her into a crate gently. If she resists too much, we might need a mild sedative. But she needs treatment soon. She glanced at the puppies. It would be best if they come too. They're still nursing, and separating them for too long would be stressful. But she also warned Kyle that sedation could be risky for a nursing mother. We have to be careful, Winter said. But we don't have much time. As news of the injured mother spread, Kyle's neighbors, many of whom had been hesitant about the stray dogs before, began to change their tune. Mrs. Lopez donated a bag of fresh blankets. Mr. Gibson, the retired firefighter down the street, offered to help transport the dogs if needed. Even those who had once feared the strays now saw them differently. It's not the same when you see them up close, one neighbor murmured, watching the frail mother struggle to keep her puppies fed. They're just trying to survive. The neighborhood pulled together. If Kyle was busy, someone else would check on the dogs. If the mother needed urgent care, there would be help. It was a small but powerful reminder. That kindness wasn't just about one person helping a stray. It was about a community standing up for them. The local rescue group arranged for a vet appointment that same day. Kyle and Winter devised a plan. They would coax the mother into a crate using food, hoping her hunger and maternal instincts would guide her inside. If that failed, they would consider a mild sedative. Kyle laid down a trail of shredded chicken leading into the crate. At first, the mother dog followed her puppies as they eagerly sniffed their way forward. She hesitated at the crate's entrance, doubt flickering in her tired eyes. For a moment, it seemed like she would step inside. Then, instinct took over. She recoiled, realizing the walls could trap her. With a panicked whimper, she backed away. The puppies, oblivious, dove into the crate, gobbling up the food. But their mother? She stood outside, staring at Kyle, as if pleading with him not to do this. She let out a low whine, her gaze filled with betrayal. After several attempts, she became too anxious and limped toward the fence, panting heavily. Winter sighed. She senses the trap. Kyle's stomach tightened. He didn't want to force her. Didn't want to break the fragile trust they had built. But he also knew that if they waited too long, her injury could get worse. And then, she might not make it at all. Kyle watched her carefully. The way she winced as she nursed her puppies. The exhaustion in her eyes. She was trying so hard to protect them. But she needed help. And Kyle had to make a decision. I don't want to traumatize her, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Winter placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. I know, she said. But in the long run, this is for them. For all of them. They weighed the options. Slow approach. Less stress, but too much time. Quick sedation. Faster, but risky. As Kyle debated, he glanced down. At the puppies gnawing on his shoelaces. At their tiny, fragile bodies. At the mother, who had risked everything to bring them here. She's fought so hard for them, Kyle thought. Now, it's my turn to fight for her. He exhaled deeply. Let's try a mild sedative, he finally said. Just enough to keep her calm. Winter nodded. It's not perfect, she admitted. But it might be enough. That night, the rescue team prepared. A van was loaded with supplies. Neighbors gathered quietly for support. Mrs. Lopez held a flashlight. Mr. Gibson sat near the fence, whispering a quiet prayer. Then. It was time. The mother dog sniffed at the shredded chicken laced with a gentle sedative. She hesitated. But hunger. And the scent of her puppies already inside the crate led her forward. Slowly. Cautiously. Kyle held his breath. Would she eat it? Or would she sense something was wrong? The moment stretched on forever. Then. She ate. Winter watched carefully. Her blinking is slowing, she whispered. She's getting tired. Kyle's heart pounded as he saw it. The moment the mother dog, finally too weary to fight, lowered her head onto the blankets. She was still awake. But too drowsy to panic. Winter and another rescuer moved in gently, lifting her with careful hands. The puppies whimpered as they were placed beside her in the crate. The mother dog let out a soft, sleepy whine. She didn't resist. She didn't struggle. She just let it happen. And for the first time, she wasn't fighting to survive. She was being saved. Kyle exhaled, his eyes stinging with tears. Relief. Guilt. And most of all, hope. As the rescue van pulled away, he whispered under his breath. You're safe now. The mother dog had done everything she could to protect her puppies. Now. It was their turn to protect her. Kyle had thought he was just helping a stray family. Feeding them. Giving them a safe place to rest. But now, as he walked back into the clinic, he realized. This was so much more. Winter had hugged him before they left. We'll get them to the clinic now. You can come with us if you want, if it's too much, you can wait here. But Kyle didn't hesitate. He wasn't about to let them wake up alone, surrounded by strangers. So, he followed. Driving close behind the rescue van, his hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The glow of the van's taillights blurred as emotions swirled inside him. Hope. Guilt. Fear. Inside the van, the mother dog lay motionless, sedated in her crate. Kyle knew it was necessary. But seeing her so limp, so still. It hurt. Beside her, the puppies cried, confused by yet another change in their fragile world. Scratching at the bars. Calling for their mother. Kyle swallowed hard and kept driving. This had to be done. This was for them. The clinic parking lot glowed under fluorescent lights. Vet techs were already waiting at the entrance, alerted by Winter ahead of time. They moved swiftly but gently, carefully lifting the mother dog from her crate. The air inside smelled of antiseptic. And the quiet hum of distant whimpers filled the halls. Kyle stayed near the reception desk, filling out paperwork while keeping his eyes on the exam room doors. He knew the mother dog would wake up confused. And he hated the thought of her waking up alone. Dr. Carter, the quiet, no-nonsense veterinarian, led them into a small exam room. Under the bright surgical lights, the mother dog was lifted onto the stainless steel table. Her puppies whined from the crate below, already distressed by the separation. Kyle crouched next to them, slipping his fingers through the metal bars. "I'm here," he whispered. "She's okay." Dr. Carter carefully examined the mother's injured leg. Pressing around the swollen area, he murmured. "It could be a puncture wound, from debris or another dog's bite. There's already signs of infection." Winter took notes on her clipboard. Kyle just watched. He wanted to do something. But all he could do was hope. The vet prepared antiseptic, his touch gentle but firm. The mother dog flinched. Even sedated, she let out a weak whimper. The puppies. They heard her. Their tiny cries grew frantic, scratching at the crate bars. Dr. Carter's voice was low, reassuring. "We're almost done." The wound needed stitches to prevent further infection. Kyle winced every time the needle pierced her skin. She had survived so much. For how long had she walked on this injury? Had she been in constant pain, carrying her puppies through the streets? If she hadn't found Kyle's yard, would she have survived at all? The vet finished the stitches, wrapping the wound carefully. Then, he administered antibiotics and pain medication before stepping back. "It wasn't as deep as I feared," Dr. Carter admitted. "But the infection had started. She needs a clean environment and continuous antibiotics." He glanced at the puppies. "When she wakes up, keep them close. If she doesn't see them, she might panic." Kyle felt the weight of responsibility settle over him. Before, he had just fed them. Now, he was part of saving them. "Can she stay here overnight?" Kyle asked hesitantly. His backyard wasn't a clinic. And he didn't know if he could care for a recovering mother dog and all her puppies alone. Winter exchanged glances with the vet. Normally, overnight stays were expensive, and rescue clinics were always stretched thin. But Winter spoke up. "We'll cover it through the rescue fund." Kyle exhaled, relief washing over him. He stepped back as a vet tech gently placed the mother dog into a soft recovery crate. The puppies were transferred to a smaller enclosure nearby, where they huddled together. One of them, a tiny, black-furred pup, stumbled forward and pressed his nose against his mother's bandaged leg. 𝐤𝐤 swallowed past the lump in his throat. Did the puppy understand? Did he know she had been hurt? And that she was finally being helped? Winter led 𝐤𝐤 to the waiting area, pressing a warm mug of chamomile tea into his hands. The clinic was quiet. Empty, except for them. 𝐤𝐤 took a slow sip, letting the warmth settle him. "I'm glad we got her treatment," he murmured. "But, what now?" Winter placed a hand on his arm. "We'll watch over her," she reassured him. "Once she's stable, we'll find a foster home for the whole family." Then. She hesitated. "Unless." 𝐤𝐤 lifted his gaze. Winter studied him carefully. "Unless you'd want to keep them?" His heart stumbled. He hadn't even considered it. It was too much, wasn't it? His yard wasn't big. His life wasn't flexible. Taking in a mother dog and her puppies was a lot. But as he sat there, staring into his tea, he realized. The idea didn't scare him. It made his heart race, yes. But not in fear. In excitement. He had already fallen for them. The mother dog. The clumsy puppies who chewed on his shoelaces. The way they had trusted him, little by little. 𝐤𝐤 didn't answer right away. But as he sat there, a new thought took shape. This wasn't just pity. It wasn't just kindness. It was something more. A call. A feeling deep in his chest. A realization that maybe. Just maybe. There was room in his life for a little more chaos. A little more love. And a family he hadn't even been looking for. The clinic called. The mother dog was recovering well. The puppies were thriving. And 𝐤𝐤? He stood outside the clinic doors, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. His heart hammering. Because today. He wasn't just checking on them. He was making a decision. Would he walk away? Or would he take them home? 𝐤𝐤 barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. The mother dog's fearful gaze when she was separated from her puppies. The confused whimpers of the tiny pups. He had done everything he could. And yet, he still felt like it wasn't enough. Now, as he walked into the clinic, the scent of antiseptic filling his lungs, he knew. Today, a decision had to be made. A cheerful vet tech greeted him in the hallway. "They're doing better than expected," he said with a smile. "The mother's wound is healing, but she's still wary of strangers." 𝐤𝐤 nodded, a mixture of relief and anxiety settling in his chest. He followed the tech to a small recovery room. Lining the walls were stainless steel kennels, the quiet occasionally broken by soft whimpers. And there, in the far corner, lay the mother dog. Still. Wrapped in bandages. Her ears flicked at the sound of footsteps, and she lifted her head. For a brief moment, tension. But then. Recognition. Her posture softened. 𝐤𝐤 exhaled. She remembered him. And right beside her, her 3 puppies. Oblivious to the weight of the past few days. Tumbled over each other in playful chaos. Watching her gently nuzzle them, 𝐤𝐤 felt his heart unravel. There was trust here. Fragile. But real. Winter stood nearby, clipboard in hand. "Perfect timing," she said, nodding toward the kennel. "We've been discussing the next step." 𝐤𝐤's stomach tightened. "Do you have a foster lined up?" he asked. Winter hesitated. "Possibly," she admitted. "But, we wanted to hear your thoughts first. You've built more trust with them than anyone else." 𝐤𝐤 swallowed hard. He glanced at the mother dog. Would taking them in be too much? He thought about his small yard. The time. The cost. Spaying, vaccinations, medical care. Could he handle it? But then he thought about handing them off to strangers. Would she trust anyone else? I can take care of them, until the puppies are weaned, he found himself saying. Winter's expression softened. That's an option, too, she said. It'll be a lot, though, frequent feedings, socialization, making sure they stay safe. But if you're serious, we can support you, with supplies, vet care, everything. Kyle hesitated. He wasn't sure how to explain it. How could he put into words the feeling in his chest? It sounds strange, he muttered. But I feel like they came to my yard for a reason. I feel responsible for them. His eyes drifted back to the mother's bandaged leg. Maybe she had chosen him. Later that day, Dr. Carter, the veterinarian, came in to check on her stitches. He ran his fingers carefully over the wound, nodding. The infection is under control, and new tissue is forming, he noted. The mother dog trembled but didn't growl. A good sign. When the puppies are around 8 weeks, they can start transitioning to new homes, Dr. Carter continued. For now, she just needs stability. Kyle knelt beside the kennel. My yard is small, he murmured. But I'll do whatever it takes. Would she accept him as her protector? As her family? She blinked slowly. Not fearful. Not fully trusting. But considering. Dogs are resilient, Dr. Carter said, standing. If you're patient, she'll adjust. The puppies will, too. Kyle exhaled. The decision felt massive. But somewhere deep down, he already knew the answer. Before leaving, Winter handed him a folder. Inside, foster guidelines. A feeding schedule. Socialization tips. Warning signs to watch for. If it gets overwhelming, she said gently, we can still move them to a foster in a few days. Kyle nodded. But deep down, he already knew. He wasn't going to change his mind. This was the right step. They didn't need a shelter. They needed stability. They needed someone they already trusted. As he drove home, his yard felt strangely empty. For the first time, it wasn't a relief. He looked toward the corner where their makeshift shelter had been. Imagine the puppies wobbling around. The quiet wouldn't last much longer. Soon, it would be filled again. With tiny paws. Gentle whines. And the watchful eyes of a mother who had survived so much. Kyle pulled out the rescue pamphlet Winter had given him. He flipped through the pages, letting out a slow breath. I can do this, he whispered. And I'm not alone. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Reinforcing the fence. Setting up feeding areas. Creating a quiet, sheltered space for the mother dog. Neighbors stopped by. Mrs. Vargas brought soft blankets. Mr. Reed helped patch up a weak spot in the fence. The whole street had followed the stray family's story. Some were relieved they'd never have to see them struggling in the streets again. Others were curious about how a mother dog and her puppies would adapt to suburban life. But Kyle? He just felt grateful. They weren't just his responsibility anymore. They belonged to all of them. No one wanted to see that night. The night the mother dog was cornered by animal control. Repeat itself. She deserved better. And Kyle was determined to make sure she got it. When the rescue van pulled up that morning, the energy in Kyle's backyard shifted. Excitement. Chaos. A new beginning. Winter stepped out first, cradling one of the puppies in her arms. A volunteer gently led the mother dog forward. She moved slowly. A slight limp still in her step. But with a calmness Kyle hadn't seen before. As soon as her paws touched the grass, she lifted her ears. Sniffed the air. She remembered. The yard. Her shelter. Her puppies. The puppies hesitated for only a moment. And then, one by one, they followed her. Kyle knelt down. Held out his hand. The mother dog paused. A flicker of uncertainty. Then, with deliberate slowness, she stepped forward. And pressed her nose against his palm. Kyle felt his throat tighten. She recognized him. Trusted him. Chose him. And just like that, they were home. The next few days, they settled into a new rhythm. Eating. Sleeping. Exploring. For the first time in their lives, the puppies had routine. A home. A future. The mother dog still watched him carefully. Still kept her guard up. But she didn't flinch anymore. Didn't run. Didn't hide. She belonged here. And Kyle? He knew, without a doubt. So did he. Every time Kyle refilled the water bowl, the mother dog watched him. Wary. Calm. As if she remembered. This human had been there when she needed help the most. One afternoon, Mrs. Vargas stopped by, carrying a small box filled with donated puppy toys. Soft plush animals for chewing. A rubber bone that squeaked. The puppies, still too young to fully understand what toys were, sniffed them curiously. Then, tails wagging, they pounced. Mrs. Vargas laughed, shaking her head. They've become the town's little mascots, she teased. We're all going to miss them when they get adopted. Kyle forced a chuckle. But deep down, his chest tightened. Because the truth was, he wasn't ready. He knew he couldn't keep all 4 dogs. The rescue already had potential adopters lined up. Still, the idea of letting them go hurt. As the days passed, the mother dog's leg improved. Dr. Carter, the vet, made a house call at Winter's request. He carefully removed the stitches, inspecting the wound. The mother dog flinched at his touch. Muscles tensing. But she didn't snap. Didn't growl. She endured it. She's doing well, Dr. Carter said. Her coat's healthier, too. Regular meals and a low-stress environment make all the difference. Kyle felt a swell of pride. She was getting better. Because of him. Because of this home. Life settled into a rhythm. Mornings, Kyle knelt in the grass, refilling dishes while the dogs trotted around. Afternoons, chaos. The puppies tumbled over each other, barking at birds near the fence. Evenings, the mother curled up in her shelter, the puppies pressed against her. And Kyle? He sat nearby, reading. Or just watching them exist in peace. But even as the yard felt like a sanctuary, reality loomed. The rescue had started posting adoption photos online. Describing them as affectionate, playful shepherd mixes looking for loving homes. People took notice. A family from the next town wanted a cute puppy. An elderly man sought a calm companion. But the mother dog? No one asked about her. Older dogs. Dogs with scars. People hesitated. Winter reminded Kyle gently, if you foster, you have to be prepared to let them go. Kyle knew that. But he also knew. He wasn't ready to lose them all. One afternoon, as the puppies wrestled in his lap, Kyle admitted his fears to Mrs. Vargas. I love them, he confessed. But I'm afraid I'll let them down. She smiled, watching as the mother dog, the once terrified stray, now wagged her tail gently when Kyle spoke. Sounds like you've already done the opposite, Mrs. Vargas said. At night, Kyle sometimes heard barking from distant alleys. It was a reminder. Not every stray found a safe place. Each time the mother dog's ears flicked, Kyle felt a pang of anxiety. Were new strays coming into the area? Could another territory fight break out? The fence was secure, but Kyle had heard stories. A loose latch. A single mistake. And a dog like Duke could be in serious danger. On a neighborhood forum, people started posting about an increase in stray sightings. Some worried. Others panicked. Kyle didn't want the police knocking on his door again over complaints. So he reached out first. Officer Ruiz, who had checked in on the mother dog before, was reassuring. "We've updated procedures," she explained. "If we get calls about loose dogs, we'll investigate carefully before taking action. If the community knows she's safe and not a threat, that should help." Following her advice, Kyle sent out a short message to his neighbors, explaining the mother dog's recovery, the puppy's upcoming adoptions, and most importantly, that no one needed to fear them. To ease concerns, he attached pictures. The mother dog, resting peacefully. The puppies, playfully climbing on her. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People offered supplies. A few even asked if they could help socialize the puppies. Kyle felt something settle in his chest. This was why he had done it. But even in that moment of peace, he felt it. A sense of finality. The shelter contacted him. "Once she's fully healed, we can arrange for her space surgery and start looking for a permanent home." Kyle swallowed hard. If the right adopter came, could he let her go? Would she understand why she was being taken away again? Each time he thought about it, his chest ached. Because some bonds aren't meant to be broken. One evening, as he sat beside her, Kyle ran his fingers gently over the mother dog's ears. She didn't pull away. Didn't flinch. Instead, she let out a soft sigh. Kyle leaned closer, whispering, "No matter what happens, I won't let anything happen to you." The mother dog tilted her head and gently licked Kyle's arm. For a moment, it felt like an unspoken agreement. A quiet farewell. Or maybe a last test of trust. Kyle watched the puppies, now so much stronger, racing across the yard. Once clumsy, now confident. They chewed on each other's ears, tumbled into flower beds, and yipped in excitement. The mother dog watched them too. More relaxed now. Less afraid. And sometimes, after finishing her meal, she would approach Kyle, letting him stroke her head. Something he never would have imagined the day she limped into his yard. Even Mrs. Vargas commented on the puppy's boundless energy. "They'll be hopping that fence soon," she joked, watching them wrestle over a squeaky toy. Kyle chuckled. His once quiet yard was now filled with noise and life. His routine had changed. Frequent meals. Constant cleanup. Adapting to the endless surprises that came with raising puppies. It was exhausting. But when they looked up at him, tails wagging, eyes bright, all he felt was joy. Still, he knew this couldn't last forever. The rescue had already lined up adopters for 2 puppies. Families had passed the screenings, eager to welcome a new furry member. One family had even stopped by to meet them. And when the puppies ran up, nibbling on shoelaces, the children squealed with delight. The mother dog stood nearby, ears halfway down. Not afraid, but watchful. Like she wanted to trust the humans taking her babies. Kyle swallowed hard. Just imagining her losing them hurt. Winter reassured him, "They're old enough now. Thanks to you, they're strong, social, and ready." Kyle nodded. He was proud. But it didn't make it any easier. And then there was the mother dog. Finding homes for puppies was easy. But an older dog, with scars and a past. Much harder. The rescue had posted her story online, highlighting her gentle but cautious nature. There were a few inquiries. But nothing solid. "People hesitate when a dog has a past," Winter admitted. "But we'll keep trying. One afternoon, Mrs. Jensen, the same neighbor who once warned Kyle about strays, called over the fence. "Mind if I say hello?" Kyle hesitated but nodded. She approached slowly, hand outstretched. The mother dog sniffed. Then turned her attention back to the puppies. Mrs. Jensen smiled. "She's a good mother," she murmured. "Didn't expect that." Kyle recognized the unspoken apology. The community had once been skeptical. But now, they saw the mother dog thriving. Elsewhere, attitudes softened too. Someone on a neighborhood forum even praised how the dog had stopped roaming for food. "She looks well-fed and calm," they posted, easing fears about potential danger. People offered donations. Food. Old blankets. Kyle accepted them all. His once tidy home was now filled with dog supplies. And he didn't mind one bit. Even Officer Ruiz, who had once been called to remove the mother dog, stopped by. He handed Kyle a small stuffed animal. Thought the puppies could use a souvenir from the station. Kyle swallowed against the lump in his throat. The day was coming. Too soon. But for now, he focused on enjoying every second. Kyle took hundreds of pictures. Puppies tangled together. Puppies zooming across the yard like a parade of tiny troublemakers. Even the mother dog played sometimes. Tentatively batting at a toy with her paw, losing some of her tension. For a moment, they were a family. But at night, Kyle scrolled through adoption applications. Most were good people. Homes with fenced yards, plenty of playtime, and a willingness to commit. Winter assured him, "I'll personally check every placement. They won't go anywhere unsafe." Even so, Kyle found himself sitting outside long after dark. The mother dog curled at his feet, the puppies snuggled close. And he wondered, how did I get so attached so fast? Weeks passed. The rescue hinted at a decision. If no one steps up for her soon, you could always keep her. Kyle knew what that meant. She was older. She had medical bills. She might have emotional scars that never fully healed. But deep down, he wasn't asking if he could handle it. The real question was, could he imagine a future without her? He thought about the day she arrived. A trembling, starving mother. Choosing his yard. Prioritizing her puppy's survival over her fear. That kind of loyalty. You don't just walk away from it. A breeze rustled the grass. The puppies sighed in their sleep. Kyle ran his fingers through the mother dog's fur. Noticing how much healthier it looked. "I don't know how to let you go," he admitted, blinking back tears. And deep down, he already knew. He wouldn't. The rescue planned a special adoption day. A brightly decorated event at a local shelter, filled with families, volunteers, and excited dogs. The mother dog would attend, but under close watch. Crowds still made her nervous. Kyle arrived early, holding the mother dog securely in his arms. The puppies followed in a soft carrier, peering through mesh panels. They'd been out before. Vet visits. Short car rides. But this was different. This was goodbye. By the end of the day, 2 puppies had found their forever homes. Kyle forced himself to smile, shaking hands with their new families. "You'll be loved," he whispered to them as they were carried away. But when it came time to discuss the mother dog's fate, Kyle didn't hesitate. "She's staying with me." Winter grinned, scribbling a note on her clipboard. "Thought you might say that." Kyle knelt, scratching behind the mother dog's ear. "Looks like you picked the right yard after all, huh?" For the first time, she leaned into his touch. And wagged her tail. As Kyle guided the mother dog toward his car, the adoption event was winding down. The enclosure where the puppies had played was now empty. The families had left, taking their new furry companions home. Off to begin new lives. But as Kyle looked at the mother dog beside him, he knew her story wasn't finished yet. She had watched as her puppies were carried away, letting out a small, heartbroken whimper. But she hadn't panicked. Hadn't resisted. Instead, she had simply watched. Maybe she understood. This was the next step for them. And now, it was her turn to find out where she belonged. Kyle had spent the day talking to potential adopters. Many were drawn to the puppies. But not many had shown interest in an older, wounded mother dog. Some had asked a few hesitant questions about her limp. Only to quickly turn their attention to younger, livelier dogs. It frustrated him. This dog had risked everything to protect her puppies. Didn't she deserve a loving home too? And then, just when Kyle had almost given up hope, a quiet elderly woman had approached the enclosure. "I saw her story online," she said, introducing herself as Margaret. "She reminds me of a dog I had years ago. Loyal, a little shy, but once she trusted you, she loved you with her whole heart." Margaret had knelt beside the enclosure, speaking to the mother dog in a gentle, steady voice. The dog had lifted her head, ears twitching. She sniffed at Margaret's outstretched hand. No wagging tail. No sudden excitement. But she didn't back away. Kyle's heart leapt with hope. Margaret lived alone in a quiet home near a park. She had experience with rescued adult dogs. And understood the patience it would take to earn the mother dog's trust. The rescue team was cautiously optimistic. Margaret listened carefully as they explained the mother dog's nervous nature. And how, once she felt safe, she would be the most loyal companion. And at the end of the day, while the puppies left in the arms of their excited new families, Margaret sat with Winter, discussing the next steps. Nothing was decided yet. But Kyle could see it. That possibility. That hope. That maybe, this would be the mother dog's forever home. By the time they left the shelter, the mother dog was exhausted. Kyle spread a blanket in the passenger seat, helping her settle. For the first time, she let out a deep sigh. As if, finally, the weight of everything was lifting. Kyle reached over, gently scratching behind her ear. "You did good, Mama." His voice shook slightly. Her journey wasn't over yet. But this part was. As he pulled away from the shelter, he glanced at the empty enclosure in his rearview mirror. The puppies were gone. Off to find their own paths. And now, the mother dog's future rested on the decision still ahead. Would she leave with Margaret? Or would Kyle find that he couldn't say goodbye?